Welcome to Life Stories, where we share powerful and emotional tales of love, loss, and healing. Today's story is one of incredible struggle and redemption. It's about a family torn apart by the illness of their son, Ethan, who falls into a coma for 5 long years. His parents, Jack and Laura, fight to keep hope alive, but the weight of grief slowly consumes them. This is a journey of heartbreak, forgiveness, and the unbreakable bond of family. Join us as we dive into this unforgettable story of resilience and the lessons life has to offer. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow to begin today's story. It all began on a quiet, crisp autumn morning when Ethan, a vibrant and healthy 7-year-old, woke up feeling unwell. He complained of a headache, but his parents, Jack and Laura, thought it was just a typical cold. They had no reason to believe that this seemingly minor ailment would turn their world upside down. As days passed, Ethan's symptoms worsened, the headaches became more intense, and he started experiencing extreme fatigue and sleepless nights. Jack and Laura, concerned, took him to the doctor. After a series of tests, the diagnosis was devastating. Ethan had developed encephalitis, an inflammation of the brain caused by an infection or an autoimmune reaction. Despite receiving the best medical care available, his condition continued to deteriorate. The once joyful boy, full of energy and laughter, slowly became unrecognizable. He lost his ability to move, his once bright eyes dimmed, and his vibrant spirit seemed to vanish. Days turned into weeks, and still, there was no change. Ethan's parents were left helpless, watching as their son lay unresponsive in the hospital bed. Jack, always the optimist, refused to give up. He spent every waking moment at Ethan's bedside, whispering words of encouragement, reminding him that they were there, that they loved him, and that he had to keep fighting. Every day, Jack clung to the belief that his son would wake up. His love for Ethan fueled his unwavering hope. But for Laura, the pain was unbearable. She couldn't fathom why her son, the same boy who used to run and play with boundless energy, was now lying motionless, trapped in an unresponsive state. It was as if a dark cloud had descended upon her life. And no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't push it away. Her grief overwhelmed her. She lost interest in everything that once brought her joy. She stopped caring about her job, stopped meeting friends, and stopped taking care of herself. All she could do was sit by Ethan's side, lost in a haze of despair. The weight of the situation consumed her, and she found herself questioning everything. Why had this happened? Why to them? What had they done to deserve such pain? Jack, on the other hand, continued to believe that somehow, miraculously, Ethan would come back to them. He tirelessly sought out doctors and specialists, determined to find a cure. But with each passing day, the doctor's words became grimmer. "There's nothing more we can do," they said. "You should prepare yourselves for the worst." Those words, spoken with such finality, shattered their already fragile hearts. It was a crushing blow. The harsh reality of knowing that they might never hear their son's voice again, or see his eyes light up with joy. But despite the bleak prognosis, Jack refused to give up hope. He brought Ethan home, and every day, he sat beside him, stroking his hair, whispering the same words over and over. "Son, if you can hear me, keep fighting. We need you. We love you." Laura, however, was not as strong. The years of grief and despair had taken their toll on her. The once loving woman had become bitter and resentful, not only toward the situation but also toward Jack. Their marriage, once built on a foundation of love and trust, began to crumble under the weight of their collective pain. She lashed out at Jack, blaming him for their circumstances. She blamed fate, she blamed herself, and she even blamed Ethan, in her darkest moments. She couldn't understand how Jack could keep going, how he could remain so hopeful. Every time she saw him sit by Ethan's bedside, whispering hopeful words, it felt like a painful reminder of how broken she had become. The weight of Ethan's illness had transformed her, and she resented it. One evening, after yet another argument, Jack finally snapped. "You need to pull yourself together," he shouted, his voice raw with frustration. "You're not the woman I married. When was the last time we even talked? When did we last eat together?" Laura's face twisted in pain. The truth of his words cutting deeper than she could bear. "Of course I've changed," she cried. "What do you expect? Our son has been in a coma for 5 years. I hate this life. I hate everything about it." The pain in her voice, the depth of her despair, was so raw that Jack didn't know how to respond. They had once been the perfect couple, partners in every sense of the word. But now they were strangers living under the same roof. Each passing day seemed to pull them further apart. And yet, despite everything, Jack refused to give up. He clung to the hope that one day, Ethan would wake up. But Laura, trapped in her own grief, found it harder and harder to believe. The toll of Ethan's illness on their marriage became more and more evident as the years went by. Jack, despite everything, remained unwavering in his belief that his son would eventually wake up. His days revolved around sitting by Ethan's bedside, talking to him as though he could hear him, hoping that his words would somehow reach his son's unconscious mind. Jack's love for Ethan fueled him to keep going, despite the darkness that had settled over their lives. Laura, on the other hand, found herself sinking deeper into a well of despair. The relentless weight of the situation was too much for her to bear. The once vibrant woman, full of life and laughter, had become a shell of herself. She could no longer find joy in anything. She had stopped visiting friends, had stopped caring about her appearance, and even her job seemed insignificant. The constant fear, the endless waiting, and the emotional toll of caring for Ethan had left her emotionally drained. The once loving couple found themselves drifting further apart. Every day felt like a battle, not only against Ethan's illness but against each other. Their home, once a sanctuary of love and warmth, had become a battleground where frustration and resentment ran high. The arguments between Jack and Laura became more frequent, their words sharp and painful. "I can't do this anymore," Laura whispered one night, her voice trembling. "I can't keep waiting for him to wake up. It's tearing me apart." Jack didn't know how to respond. His heart broke for her, but he couldn't let go of the hope that somehow Ethan would return to them. The more he tried to hold on to that hope, the more Laura seemed to slip away. Then one evening, after yet another argument that left both of them emotionally drained, Laura did something that shocked Jack to his core. Overcome by frustration and hopelessness, she walked into Ethan's room and stood over his motionless body. The pain she had been carrying for so long seemed to reach its breaking point. In a fit of despair, she spoke words that she would regret for the rest of her life. "Why won't you just wake up?" she cried, her voice breaking. "Why won't you just disappear?" As soon as the words left her mouth, she realized what she had said, and guilt consumed her. She ran back to her room, fell to the floor, and sobbed uncontrollably. That night, despair took over, and for the first time, Laura considered ending her own pain, ending the life that felt unbearable. Jack found her just in time, holding her trembling hands. He pleaded with her. "Please don't do this," he begged. "We need to keep fighting. Ethan needs us." Seeing no other option, Jack made the difficult decision to admit Laura to a mental health facility, where she could receive the help she so desperately needed. It was the hardest thing he had ever done, but he knew it was the only way to help her heal. At the facility, Laura began to receive therapy, and slowly, she started to rebuild her life. She found the strength to face her pain and begin to heal. With the help of her therapist, she learned how to manage her emotions and regain some sense of stability. It wasn't easy, but over time, she found herself growing stronger. She eventually returned to work, and with a renewed sense of purpose, she became determined to provide the best care possible for Ethan, to be the wife and mother she once was. To ensure Ethan had the care he needed, Jack and Laura hired a compassionate nurse named Sarah. Sarah treated Ethan as though he were her own child, speaking to him with the belief that he could hear every word, offering him comfort and support even though he was still in a coma. And slowly, something incredible began to happen. Months passed, and despite everything, Jack and Laura never stopped believing that Ethan might wake up. They continued to care for him with the help of Sarah, who treated him with the kind of compassion that seemed to touch everyone who met her. The house, once filled with tension and sorrow, began to feel more like a home again. Laura, though still haunted by the past, was learning to live with the pain and move forward. She was starting to find peace, little by little. And then, one afternoon, something miraculous happened. Sarah, who had been tending to Ethan in his room, suddenly heard a faint sound. At first, she thought it was just her imagination. But then she heard it again, a soft moan. Her heart skipped a beat as she turned toward Ethan. His lips moved, and for the first time in 5 long years, his eyelids fluttered. They opened just a fraction, revealing the faintest glimmer of recognition before they closed again. Sarah's breath caught in her throat, and she immediately rushed to Ethan's side. Her hands shook as she gently placed them on his arms, calling his name. She didn't want to believe it was real, but the evidence was undeniable. Ethan was waking up. She cried out for joy, her voice trembling with excitement. She had just witnessed a miracle. When Jack and Laura arrived home that afternoon, Sarah greeted them with tears of joy. "He's awake," she said, her voice barely containing her excitement. "He moved. He's showing signs of waking up." Jack and Laura rushed to Ethan's room, their hearts pounding with anticipation. Could it be? Could their son, who had been in a coma for 5 years, finally be returning to them? "Ethan?" Jack whispered, his voice shaking with emotion as he knelt beside his son's bed. "Son, are you awake?" Ethan's eyelids fluttered once more, and for a split second, he opened his eyes, but the gaze he fixed on his mother sent a chill through her heart. His eyes, once filled with love and light, were now filled with confusion and fear. Before Laura could say a word, Ethan's face twisted in terror. "Get her away from me," he screamed, his voice filled with raw emotion. "Leave. Go away." Laura froze. She couldn't believe what she was hearing. This was her son, the boy she had loved with all her heart. But he was rejecting her. He was frightened of her. Her knees buckled beneath her, and Jack had to grab her arm to steady her as Ethan sobbed uncontrollably in his bed. "No, Ethan," Laura whispered, her voice barely a breath. "It's me, Mom. It's Mommy. Please, Ethan, don't be scared." But Ethan only screamed louder, his face contorted with fear. Jack quickly pulled Laura back, unsure of what to do or say. His heart ached as he saw the pain in both of their eyes. He never imagined this would be how their reunion would play out. The doctor entered the room, and the scene grew even more intense as they tried to calm Ethan. When the room finally cleared, and Jack and Laura were left alone with the doctor, Ethan's truth came to light. With trembling lips, Ethan spoke softly. "My mom, she hates me. And now I hate her too." Jack and Laura were stunned. They had no idea what Ethan meant. But the doctor gently prodded. "Ethan, why do you feel this way?" Through his tears, Ethan explained that while in the coma, though he couldn't speak or move, he could hear everything. He had heard his mother's words. Words that he never should have overheard. Words that were spoken in the darkest moments of her pain. Ethan's voice trembled as he spoke of the things Laura had said in her frustration. Things that had cut him deeper than he could have ever imagined. "I heard her say she wished I would just wake up, or disappear," he whispered, the pain evident in his voice. The doctor's eyes filled with sympathy. "That must have been so painful for you, Ethan," he said softly. "But do you think maybe your mom was just lost in her own pain?" Ethan hesitated. "I don't know," he whispered. "Maybe, but it still hurt." Meanwhile, outside the hospital room, Laura was frozen in place. She could hardly comprehend what she had just heard. Her hands trembled as she buried her face in them, unable to believe the words her son had spoken. She had never meant those words. She had been drowning in her own despair. But that didn't make it any easier to bear. "I never meant those words," she cried to Jack, her voice breaking. "I never wanted to hurt him. I was so lost." Jack gently wrapped his arms around her. "You need to tell him that. Laura, you need to tell him the truth." Tears streamed down Laura's face as she realized the depth of her son's pain. She had to find a way to make it right. As the days passed, Laura found the strength to write her son letters. Every morning, she left him a handmade card with a simple message, "I'm sorry." For an entire week, Ethan ignored the cards, his pain too deep to acknowledge them. But then one day, Laura entered his room, her heart heavy with guilt. She knelt beside his bed, her hands trembling as she reached for his. "Ethan," she whispered, her voice thick with emotion, "I don't deserve your forgiveness. But if you can find it in your heart, please know that I am so sorry." Ethan looked at her, his eyes filled with tears. After a long silence, he took her hand, his voice barely a whisper, "Mom, I was so scared. I thought you didn't want me anymore." Laura's heart broke as she squeezed his hand. "I never stopped loving you, Ethan. I was just lost in my own pain. Please, forgive me." And with those words, the walls between them began to crumble. Slowly, but surely, their relationship healed. After months of recovery, Ethan was discharged from the hospital, still in a wheelchair but filled with hope for the future. The family, once broken, was finally whole again. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and follow for more life stories.